What if the individual could reconstruct blue zones in their own personal story by following the Power 9 principles, by following their own personal story and allowing themselves to reshape community in their own individual lives by following the individual recipe that is just right for them? That is the question we will be exploring in this video. Hello, I'm Antoinette Naomi, an anthropologist and behavioral scientist, and today I want to talk to you about blue zones and just introducing the idea of how can one cultivate their own blue zone in their own life. I thought about this subject matter looking at it from the angle of individuals that may have experienced trauma in their lives, because growing up without a mother, as a motherless daughter, and also having had a childhood that I would in no way brag about, a childhood where I experienced trauma and where I also experienced feeling isolated and feeling let down, if you will, by the adults or my caregivers, I would say that one of the most impactful parts of that awareness says how somebody like that, somebody that actually in their adulthood had like a move away from pattern, a behavior, as many psychologists say, that if somebody is experiencing trauma, they find themselves retreating for safety, retreating to safety. And so with these blue zones, Dan Buettner has eloquently done so much research on the subject matter of blue zones. I just thought to myself, what are some ideas that could actually allow the individual, because it has been basically analyzed by the researchers that actually studied these blue zones and really looking at the longevity of individuals that live in the blue zones in comparison to others. So he talks about these, he calls them the Power 9 principles that enrich a person's life and influence longevity. Yeah, one of the areas that he talks about that I'm interested in more so than any is really the importance of community as one of the Power 9 principles. And of course, moving naturally as opposed to exercise. That's the first one. He talks about downshifting. So downshifting is one of the tactics that they use. Every day they have a capacity to do some sort of ritual where they allow themselves to downshift. Also, all of them have a sense of purpose, a sense of waking up in the morning, as opposed to being aimless or as opposed to being directionless in their lives. They actually have a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning for their lives. Also, their diet. I'm a vegan. I have been vegan most of my adult life. They emphasize a plant slant, if you will, a plant-based diet. They also emphasize wine. I don't drink. I'm a non-alcohol drinker, but they do emphasize red wine, and in a lot of cases that's something that was signature. And then they also emphasize like the 80% rule. He talks about how Okinawans use the 80% rule, where if they feel 80% full, they stop eating. And connection. The reason why I want to talk about these Power 9 principles, but really emphasize connection, is because that's part of longevity. So they say loved ones, like that's really one of their first. So they have connections, loved ones, a feeling of belonging, and they have a right tribe. And so with the loved ones, the centenarians, they have a principle of really holding their loved ones first, where centenarians have a tendency to place family at a high priority, and they also have a tendency to work on their relationships. That's interesting because I started reflecting on this. My dad's mother, my paternal grandmother, she died when she was 100, and that was one of her cornerstones. So she centered around family, and also she had a faith-based experience because she was deeply religious. However, she was very, very centered around family oriented, always family, always family, always family. there was also one thing that I noticed when reflecting on my memories about my paternal grandmother is I remember growing up how she had a crop. So she grew her own food. She raised her own chickens, even her own turkey, like during Thanksgiving. And I remember butter beans and corn and squash and like all types of vegetables. I remember being on the porch, my grandmother's porch, shelling corn or opening up butter beans or even potatoes. So my grandmother she had her own, it was more than a garden. It was acres of land where she actually had her own crops that she grew, her own vegetables that she grew. And that was something that could actually go back to the plant slant. However, and of course, those were all vegetables, fresh vegetables that she grew. She was in no way plant-based. However, she did have that natural food bore from nature. And they also talk about connections with the remaining two, belonging. People in blue zones tend to belong to a faith-based community. So basically, my grandmother had a faith-based community. She was very religious. I remember being one of those children that I was in Bible study and Sunday school. I remember we had to clean the pews. We had to go and clean the church for services. And we were heavily involved with her faith. That's what she believed. She also read the Bible. So she had a strong faith. So I could see how that actually played a role. According to Buechner, those that have some sort of community, faith-based community, live 4 to 14 years longer. Also, the right tribe. Health-based behaviors and those deleterious behaviors such as obesity, smoking, excessive drinking, excessive smoking, unhappiness, loneliness are also contagious. And he noticed that those that live longer curate social circles around them. And that's the reason why I wanted really to do this video to center in on that subject only. The reason why is because what I've learned is there are a lot of individuals that spend a lot of time alone. Loners spend a lot of time alone. Individuals that actually have found comfort in being alone spend a lot of time alone. And they have developed a habit of doing so because it's comfortable, because it feels good, especially if there was a sense of trauma growing up where there was a needing to retreat, like moving away from the tribe that seemed to be disruptive in their childhood. In their adulthood, the habit can become feeling like I have to be alone. That's where I feel the safest. That's where I feel the most comfortable. So the reason why I want to actually talk about that is because there are a few books and also a few processes that might be able to assist those with the habit of being alone to be able to branch out and move into a way of being that a social circle, move into a way of forming a social circle that's a lot more supportive, i.e. there's something called the Hoffman process. It's in different pockets of the world. It started in Southern California by Bob Hoffman. So Bob Hoffman said, we learn our habits emotionally. Therefore, we only come to healing by releasing emotionally. And so he has this process that deals with when we're healing, we have to come to a place where we arrive at a complete sense of compassion for ourselves. If we have a tendency to like to be loners or like to be alone, have compassion for oneself. If you have a tendency to just say, I had parents that were, I had parents that were screwed up, or I had parents that were cold or abandoned me or isolating or hostile or harsh. You just have to come to a place of compassion for those parents. Had caregivers that were hostile. Just have to come to a place of compassion for those caregivers. First and foremost, though, whether it be parents, teachers, caregivers, friends, community, whatever, the isolation is a habit. So isolation is a habit. And in order to break that habit, the habit that was formed needs to be dealt with emotionally, with compassion, with sincere desire to change. So Hoffman's theory is the negative love syndrome, and he has a 4-part model of being. That is, it's called the quadrinity. So our emotions or feelings, our intellect or thoughts, our spirit or essence, our physical realm or body. He also talks about the 4 most essential parts or essential steps to really transform one's life: awareness first and foremost, expression, forgiveness, and then a new behavior. So the Hoffman process is an in-depth process, and it's in no way something that I'm giving you here. I'm just informing you, and if you are interested, you can go do some research and really dig your teeth into it. However, with what do you really want in life? They say, ask yourself this question: if I could, I would, ... And then, before I die, I will, ... Because if somebody is wanting to increase their life and to really develop a sense of purpose, have a sense of connection, release themselves from loneliness, release themselves from the patterns of the past, then this process is a really great process that can allow for individuals to do a deep dive with releasing issues and healing the past. He talks about making peace and moving forward, meaning coming to a place where one can honestly say that the past is over and no need to go back emotionally, mentally, and physically, or through recurrent events in your life. And in order for that to happen, though, one has to go back to the past and release the past. In order to enrich your relationships with friends, with family, with new friends, embarking upon new relationships, there has to be a new behavior, a new you, a new way of existing, and one has to have the courage to change. One also has to have the awareness, hey, I know my behaviors. I know that I prefer to be alone. I know that I prefer to actually experience life without drama. At the same time, what's the reason why it has to be drama? There can come a time in one's life when they say, okay, either I'm going to do it on my own, or I'm going to invite new humans into my life where I can enrich their lives and they can enrich mine. In order for that to happen, I have to first grow. I have to first go back to my past, see what's caused me to want to be alone, what's caused me to be a loner, what's caused me to say I have no friends. There are a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of videos out there promoting loneliness or promoting I'm so alone, or I have no friends. I'm a loner. I have no friends. Really? Like, those are individuals that are saying, I have a habit of isolating. I have a habit of being a loner. I have a habit of choosing, operative word being choosing, to be alone. Cultivating community means that is a habit that needs to be formed. So the Hoffman process, as you go through it, chapter 16 will take you through a daily action plan, like an action plan that you can actually take, where you can take specific steps in order to cultivate new behaviors so that you can begin to influence change in your life. And the most important part of it that he talks about is, and Tim Lawrence is the person that actually, the author of the book, and he became one of the teachers and coaches of the Hoffman process. So there are 10 patterns that they mention in chapter 16. They mention love patterns, work patterns, sex patterns, image patterns, fear patterns, anger patterns, money patterns, power patterns, invalidation patterns, and responsibility patterns. They didn't mention this one, and I feel like it's important. Social patterns. The reason why I feel like social patterns are important is because what are your social patterns? If the tendency is to isolate, and community is one of the main forces that actually allows for individuals to have a longer lifespan, then that is a critical area of one's life that has to be paid attention to, because social patterns are very important. So the Hoffman process is one process. There is another process called reinventing your life. Reinventing Your Life was developed by doctors Jeffrey Young and Janet Klosko. And in the processes, they talk about life traps or schemas. They call them life traps. And there are certain things that an individual gets stuck in, and patterns that they get stuck in, and ruts that they get stuck in. And so they talk about examples of these life traps could be depression, anxiety, panic attacks, addiction, eating disorders, sexual problems, insomnia, chronic relationship problems, intimacy issues, isolation, chronic unachievement in their career, etc. The way they define these life traps specifically are abandonment, mistrust and abuse, dependence, vulnerability, emotional deprivation, social exclusion, defectiveness, failure, subjugation, unrelenting standards, and entitlement. Those are the 11 life traps. And those different life traps, you can also do some research to understand them at a deeper level. They take you through case studies and show you exactly how those life traps, or kind of give you examples of how those life traps play out. And then at the end of each chapter, or at the end of each life trap, they give you some instructions on how to go about clearing it. When I read both books, I found that the Hoffman process was more in tuned and more in depth, even though the Reinventing Your Life really was pretty thorough. It just left a lot to the individual dealing with these life traps. And because as a human, from human to human, if you can look at your life and you can say, wait a minute, I know myself, I know my tendencies. So if somebody has to really want to change in order to look at those life traps, it's a nice starting point. It's a nice ability for somebody to actually say, okay, this is me. Some of those life traps can be combined with Reinventing Your Life. It gives a nice, thorough examination of these different schemas, or these different cycles or patterns or life traps, as they call them, and an opportunity for somebody to say, okay, well, these are my behaviors. And they encourage you, if you have multiple ones, they encourage you to pick one at a time and go at it, to analyze it, look at it, and change it, to actually, therefore, go back to the, as Bob Hoffman uses, the awareness, expression, forgiveness, and a new behavior. So with these life traps, they encourage you to, with these patterns, to actually to execute your own will to transform those behaviors. There's also another that I want to actually share that might be helpful, and that is What Happened to You, written by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Perry. Last year, the only video that I shared within the 6 years that I was offline. However, in that book, it actually talks about something very specific, and it is dosing. And dosing is an opportunity for individuals to kind of pivot from the idea that they have to talk about everything, all of their problems. And so they can actually just think about or identify one issue going on in their lives and talk to a loved one, talk to somebody close to you. And if you have nobody that's close to you, go and deal with a warm line. So a warm line is a place where you can actually pick up the phone and they will talk to you for 15 to 30 minutes for free. It's government funded or privately funded. And if you find a really great warm line, you have really great individuals, really great volunteers, or really great individuals that are choosing to dedicate their private lives to helping a fellow human on earth to heal in a private moment that they're going through in their lives. And I feel like that's a nice way, especially for individuals that have a tendency to feel uncomfortable with getting close to others. That's a nice way to kind of put your feet in the water, to kind of say, okay, let me try again. Let me just actually get comfortable with humans again. And then once I get comfortable with humans again, let me get comfortable with my past in a way that I feel safe. And then once I get comfortable with my past in a way that I feel safe, then let me start thinking about new ways that I can go out and meet new individuals and start building my social circle. So your social circle is one of the most influential parts of your life. So if you're going to invite new individuals in, first start with yourself. Start with creating a lifestyle that actually says, okay, I'm going to be whole and I'm going to be healthy first. And then I'm going to say, okay, what does it look like to invite whole and healthy individuals into my life? And just because it's a community, it in no way means that those individuals are whole. It just means those individuals are also seeking community. So that's why it's almost imperative to be inviting new energies in that say, okay, what are your intentions and what do you want out of life? And how can we come together with a common goal? There was also one other book that I read, and it is Healing the Child Within. I'm going to go into that in depth at another time. But that one takes you down the path of really being able to cycle through those memories and healing those memories. There's also another book. So it's Healing the Child Within, and then Unlocking the Secrets of Your Childhood Memories by Kevin Leman and Randy Carlson. I'm going to go into depth with both of those books at another time, but they really talk about how important your memories are. In the second one, Unlocking the Secrets of Your Childhood Memories, it's imperative to go back to those memories, really those memories pre-7 years old, pre-6 years old, and follow those memories as your mind takes you there, and it will help you to see the cycles, the loops and the cycles and the patterns that show up in your life. There's one other thing to share. I notice here in Belgium, I live in Belgium, and one of the individuals that lives next door to me, he's a smoker and I'm a non-smoker. I do have issues around smoking being around me. I dislike it. And however, one of the things I noticed is they talk about how important it is for the government and the city and the establishments to get more involved with the health and safety of their citizens and the individuals that live in their communities. So I did a quick comparison. So in Belgium, the percentage is so high with how many individuals smoke and actually attack their bodies in that way. In comparison, in Brussels, for instance, and in Santa Monica, it's different because they have laws in place. You can't even smoke in the buildings. They have signs posted showing you that there is a propensity for cancer because there are chemicals on the premises that could cause that. So it's almost as if it's like a collective effort has to also take shape. At the same time, as an individual, one has to say, okay, how can I take care of my own health? How can I take care of my own life? How can I empower myself to say, okay, if I have individuals that are irresponsible with their own health around me, how can I remove myself from those environments? So, and in the meantime, how does one create and cultivate an environment where they no longer have to endure negativity in order to feel connected, in order to have a sense of belonging? So no matter where you are in the world, I want to say thank you so much for giving your valuable time. I wish you so much joy, so much peace, and so much happiness. And also be good to yourself and also be good to one another. Peace and blessings.